here we are in chapter 8, where we are looking at intervals. Now, especially with this particular chapter, if you have not yet gone through and looked at the lecture materials or been to a live lecture, attended a live lecture, I strongly encourage you to do that before you begin this section, because there's a really specific way that I like to suggest that people approach these assignments or this interval identification. And if you haven't already heard me talk about it there, then you're not gonna hear about it, so you won't know what I'm talking about. So go ahead and go back to that and look over that if you haven't already. And in the meantime, here we are going to do our homework together. So let's get started. So here we are, and we are asked to write the specific name of each interval, meaning like not just a third, but what kind of third are we asked to do. So here we go with number 2. So the first thing that I always suggest that people look at when you're looking at naming intervals is try to figure out the number, like what distance are we talking about? So what type of interval is it? So one way to do that is by determining how far apart they are. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4. So that if we're talking about scale degrees, that's where we're talking. Like this is scale degree 1, this would be 2, this would be 3, and this would be 4. So we know that this is some kind of fourth. And then our next step is to determine what kind of fourth. So remember, we have that whole chart about whole steps and half steps. And I'll write it out again if you want to reference it, but 1 half step is a minor second, 2 is a major second, 3 is a minor third, 4 is a major third, 5 is a perfect fourth. So another way to write that would be a half of a step is, a half of a whole step would be a minor second, 1 whole step would be a major second, 1 1/2 would be a minor third, 2 would be a major third, and 2 1/2 whole steps would be a perfect fourth. So whichever way works for you is how you should do it. But either way, you're going to need to go back through and figure out what we're talking about here. So if you have a D to G, and we think, all right, well, D to E is a whole step, that's 1. E to F sharp is a whole step, that's 2 whole steps. And then F sharp to G is a half step, so that's 2 1/2 whole steps. And as we just saw, that means that the interval we're working with is a perfect fourth. So there we go. Moving on to number 3, the first step is determine what your number is. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So we know that this is some kind of fifth, right? And then we're going to do our whole step trick again. So A to B is a whole step. B to C sharp is a whole step. C sharp to D sharp is a whole step, so that's 3 whole steps. And then D sharp to E is 3 1/2 whole steps, which means what we're working with here is a perfect fifth. Same process here, number 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we know that this interval is some kind of sixth. We'll do our whole steps and half steps, counting that. So we know that D to E is a whole step. E to F sharp is a whole step. F sharp to G sharp is a whole step. G sharp to A sharp is a whole step. And A sharp to B is a half step. So that means we have one, 2, 3, 4 and a half whole steps. 4 and a half whole steps, which means, do you remember? Major sixth. Let's move on. We've got some accidentals in our last one in this line. Two ways to approach this. There's one way that's quick, but it requires a little bit of mental gymnastics. And then there's the way we do with everything else. So we'll start with that one. Same process. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So we know we're working with some sort of seventh. And then we're going to count our whole steps. So E to F sharp is 1. F sharp to G sharp is 2. G sharp to A sharp is 3. A sharp to B sharp, we'll call it. There's the dog saying hello. He doesn't like B sharp. He doesn't like that interval any more than you all do. B sharp to, let's say, C sharp. That's a half step, right? B sharp to C sharp is a half step. C sharp to D sharp is a whole step. So that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and a half steps, which means it's a major seventh. Well, here's another way. To me, that's a little bit long way to get around. Here's what I think when I look at this. Oops. I look at this note and this note, and I see very quickly that they're very close to being an octave apart, right? So an octave less a half step. And I know that an octave minus a half step is a major seventh. Now, I'm able to do that. That makes sense to me. This leap up to an octave and down to a half step makes perfect sense to me. I recognize that not everybody thinks of it in the same way. So there's two versions. They both work. You choose the one that makes the most sense to you.